Hey there guys, alright, today we are watching BazBattles. Gonna add another new channel to the roster of channels that we watch. This time Alexander the Great with the Battle of Gaugamela, 331 BCE. And yeah, we're not gonna talk much. I'm gonna try and not ramble as much in the beginning of my videos now. I'm gonna try and be better about that. I do not make any promises. I'm gonna try. Let's go ahead and dive right into the video.
It's September of the year 331 BC. After taking Phoenicia in Egypt, Alexander marches east to the inland of the Persian Empire. As his troops were about to cross the Tigris River, he received scout reports that Persian king Darius had gathered another huge army and was preparing for a decisive encounter with the Macedonians. Both armies finally met on the vast open field near the village of Gaugamela in a final clash between the two biggest powers of classical antiquity.
Ooh, I like that. I really like the style that they've got going here. You can tell, like, these are obviously the companion cavalry, just based on the stars is what I'm going to go off of. And then also you can make the assumption here that the stars on the other side then are also going to be Darius's troops, his own personal guard. And so then I'm going to make the assumption that this is Alexander's personal guard here, the companion cavalry right here on the flank. I like that little detail. It makes it easy to follow, like, where is the king of either side of these armies. You gotta look. Ready your bows. Skilled well. I like their BazBattles thing here. Kind of looks like something you would see on a free-to-play mobile game. I played a lot of free-to-play mobile strategy castle building games when I was in middle school. And this is exactly what it reminds me. And I like it. It gives me a nostalgic. Ooh, I like this card here too, where they have these different battles.
It's the beginning of the year 331
That's really cool.
BC. After the successful subjugation of Tyre and Gaza, the Macedonian army took some time to regenerate in the rich valley of the Nile. The Egyptian satrap didn't oppose Alexander, as the Macedonian was seen as a liberator rather than an invader, since Egypt wasn't the most loyal of Persian provinces. After the crushing defeat near Issus, Persian king Darius changed his approach.
I like how, again, this is another thing that I have noticed in every single video when it comes to Alexander the Great and his journey and like the movement of his army. And now, of course, and they don't even mention it. They just show it here. And it's crazy that it's always shown. Alexander's journey to Ammonium, where he met, I believe it was with a somewhat like a prophet or whatever, like the person in Delphi, kind of thing. I think that was the situation in Ammonium, right? Crossing the desert. Memory's a little funky right now, so I can't remember, but that's what I'm remembering a little bit. That sounds the most correct in my head. But every single video always shows it, even if they don't mention it, and even if it's not even necessarily important to this. Like, this is the Battle of Gaugamela. They didn't need to show it, but they still showed it, and I like that.
And tried to stop Alexander's extraordinary conquest by using diplomacy. Yet the Macedonian king refused Darius's increasingly generous terms thrice, and with winter passing by, started to draw the plans for the upcoming Babylonian campaign. With all
Alexander wanted
preparations
to be the
completed,
king of kings,
the refreshed and
undisputed.
decently supplied Macedonian force marched out back to Phoenicia in the beginning of April. It's worth noting that Alexander paid significant attention to the often overlooked logistical part of his conquests. Maintaining such a considerable force in excellent shape for many years far away from home required exceptional planning and stellar management. For as long as it was possible, the Macedonian army stuck to the coast and utilized the fleet to take
BazBattles, you're fucking fantastic. Yes, I love that they're mentioning it. Honestly, yeah, that is something that is completely overlooked whenever you talk about, and whenever Alexander the Great is talked about. It's always like, yeah, he went and fucking conquered pretty much the world. Because at this time, the Achaemenid Empire, I believe, at its height, controlled the I think it control. I don't know if it controlled this at Darius. I don't know if this was the percentage at Darius's time, or if it was before Darius. It was maybe during Cyrus, but for some time, the Achaemenid Empire controlled 25% of the world's population. That's fucking insane. So to obviously wage a war against such a sizable enemy, Alexander needs to be logistically. He needs his logistics fucking down tight, otherwise he's gonna get fucked over.
Take care of provisions. Darius was well informed of the Greek movement, and by the time Alexander crossed the Euphrates, the new Persian army was being assembled. The King of Kings expected the Macedonians to march along the river straight to Babylon, and decided to use scorched earth tactics by ordering the plunder of the Euphrates Valley. But thriving cities lying close to the river were decently defended, making supply gathering quite challenging. So Alexander chose a northern route instead, which, although longer, had rural settlements that offered easy access to food and water. Upon hearing the unexpected news, Darius instantly departed Babylon, heading north along the east bank of the Tigris River. He appointed a strong mounted unit under Mazaeus, governor of Babylon, to guard the northern crossing of the Tigris and plunder its east bank to hinder the Macedonian march. But Mazaeus failed to challenge the Greeks during the crossing, and in the middle of September, Alexander reached the east side of the river. Darius knew that the encounter was close, so he started to seek a suitable place for the upcoming battle. He set up camp on a wide plain near the village of Gaugamela.
What's crazy, another thing that I think I have pointed out before, like especially when it comes to Julius Caesar and his opponents, like, you have Julius Caesar versus Pompey. Pompey is one of the greatest generals in history, but Caesar was better. But Caesar was so good that he almost kind of makes Pompey look bad. Like, that's how good he was. And then again, now Darius probably, we don't know. I wouldn't say we know too much about Darius's military skills, right? I think most of what we know about Darius's military conquests come from really mainly his fighting against Alexander the Great. At least that's what I know. I could be wrong. Feel free to correct me. But again, he's not a bad military leader from what we know. He obviously saw the most obvious approach that Alexander would take. He took the steps to mess with the logistics of that army because he knew Alexander's far away. He's not close to shore. It is going to be a struggle for him to keep his logistics, right? He needs food. He needs his people. He needs his army to be well fed. So he burns that land. He sees where Alexander's moving, and he goes and does that to the other side of on the Tigris. And he does the same thing to slow Alexander. It is smart, and then he also goes here. He makes sure Alexander comes to him on a battlefield of his choosing. Darius is smart, but Alexander is smarter. and it's kind of just like, had Darius not been facing someone like Alexander, maybe he probably would have won, right? But Alexander is one of those rare people in history where you go up against him and you just look like an idiot.
And began preparations. In the meantime, Alexander's troops caught a Persian scouting party and found out that Darius was camping 30 kilometers to the east.
And also a lot of luck like that on Alexander's part.
The
right
Macedonian king quickly dispatched his own scouts and advanced towards the enemy. Camp was set behind a hill about 10 kilometers away from the presumed battlefield, and after a few days' rest, on the last days of September, Alexander departed towards the Persian positions. The hill between the two armies was guarded by Mazaeus' detachment, but upon seeing that the whole Macedonian army was approaching, the Persian noblemen simply retreated without a fight and rode back to the camp, yielding the hill. Having the hill was an advantage, but Darius still held the open fields which suited combat for his larger army far better. So the hill was important, but an acceptable loss. Alexander took the hill, and, after a short examination of the environs, decided to set a temporary camp there. This maneuver gave him a significant advantage, as the higher ground provided a good view of the Persian camp and their troop deployment. Moreover, The hill was well suited for defense purposes, so Alexander didn't rush and comfortably prepared for the battle, making sure his troops were well fed, rested, and in good mental condition. In comparison, due to Mazias' failure, Darius was under constant threat of sudden Greek attack, even at night, so his troops had to maintain readiness for battle. Of course, Darius had superior numbers, plenty of solid cavalry, and suitable terrain, but his army could do nothing but wait for the Macedonians to make the first move, as storming the ridge was not a viable option.
Yeah, Darius was kind of forced into a position where he cannot really make a move at this point in time.
The sun slowly set on the horizon, while Alexander discussed the upcoming battle with his officers. It is said that his second-in-command, Parmenion, advised a night attack in order to catch the Persians off guard, but Alexander turned down this idea as too risky. The Macedonian command then agreed to attack the next day in the morning.
Yeah, a night attack could go
by,
really
and the
wrong,
first
really
sun rays
fast.
lit up the battlefield. It was the 1st of October. The Persian army was already in battle formations, as they spent the whole night waiting for the Macedonian attack, which never came. Darius efficiently used the manpower of his vast empire. Up to 100,000 men were gathered to fight for their king.
Holy
10,000 of the professional immortal infantry,
lot.
together with a few thousand Greek mercenaries, formed the core of the Persian center. But the real power of Darius's army was positioned on the flanks. More than 30,000 fine cavalrymen from various Persian satrapies posed a serious threat, especially on such a wide and level battlefield. Darius also had a few hundred Indian scythe chariots and even 15 elephants, though these animals probably didn't take part in the battle. The rest of his army was formed by various infantry units gathered from tribes inhabiting the Achaemenid Empire, though their battle potential was questionable. Due to the size of the Persian army, the command was split between Darius and his trusted generals, Mazias and Bessos.
I don't know if I would trust Mazias anymore. He's kind of been a coward 2 times in a row.
We could spend another 5 minutes discussing the exact positions of Bactrian cavalry or Parthian infantry in the Persian battle line. But as in battle, time is of the essence, and at this point the sun was near noon. Oversleeping Alexander finally awoke, and the refreshed Macedonian army abandoned the hill and began their deployment. 40,000 infantrymen and a 7,000-strong cavalry detachment formed a slanted battle line, with the right flank facing the front of the Persian center. To avoid possible encirclement, both flanks were sufficiently reinforced and slightly curved backwards. The Macedonian center was occupied by a disciplined Sarissa phalanx, supported by solid Hypaspist units. Cavalry was split between both flanks, Thessalian units on the left and companion cavalry on the right. The second line was occupied by Thracian and Illyrian infantry. Just like in previous battles, the command was split between Alexander and Parmenion. To achieve a flanking advantage, the Macedonian king started to move his line right, but Darius immediately countered by stretching his left flank and matched the opponent's movement. Darius had the battlefield leveled and cleared off any obstacles for more effective chariot use, which is why he wanted to prevent the Macedonians from leaving the prepared ground. Persian cavalry moved out and attacked Alexander's far right. Fierce fighting began with no clear winner, but as time passed, Macedonian cavalry prevailed and routed some of the Persian units, though suffering serious damage. Seeing the trouble on his left, Darius sent all his chariots to storm the Greek center. Yet this attack wasn't particularly successful, as defenders opened their ranks and allowed attackers to ride through the line, raining javelins on them at the same time. Following the chariots, the Persians' right flank, led by
Mazias is finally doing something.
stormed Parmenion's side, killing many Greeks in the process and forcing the Macedonian commander to give ground. Parmenion was in serious trouble, being outnumbered and partially enveloped. But it wasn't the first time he was forced to fight at unfavorable odds. His flank fought bravely and somehow endured the Persian push, though at a high cost. It was at this point that Darius noticed that Alexander was moving his flank to the right, while Parmenion stayed on the left, creating a gap in the Macedonian center. The Persian king saw this as a weak point and impulsively sent his immortal units to exploit the opening. But this was bait. Doing so exposed Darius's own center. Alexander had waited for such an opportunity. He swiftly moved companion cavalry
5D
supported
chess
by the remaining units of his flank and struck the Persian center, right where Darius's exposed royal guard stood. Despite the support of the second-line units, the impetus of the Macedonian charge quickly broke the Persian line. Soon, Darius realized the danger, and just as he did 2 years earlier, fled the battlefield. Alexander began pursuit immediately, but soon overturned his temptation and rode back to relieve Parmenion's flank. Fierce combat still raged on the Macedonian left. When rescue finally came, the remaining Persian forces were soon overwhelmed and routed. Although Darius managed to escape yet again, complicating Alexander's political plans to crown himself as the king of Persia.
Only 1,000? Wow. But then again, yeah, that is how battles before the invention of gunpowder went. Once an army routed, when the rout started is typically when the loss of manpower just skyrockets. When casualties just go way up is when the rout starts.
The military power of the Achaemenid Empire was crippled. Macedonians had the core cities of Mesopotamia and Persia at their fingertips. After the brilliant show of his strategic and tactical prowess near Gaugamela, Alexander effectively ended the hegemony of the powerful Persian Empire in less than 5 years.
Oh,
But its
built the Royal Road. I love
didn't
that.
satiate his lust for power, and his story is yet to be continued.
With his final diplomatic attempt, Darius offered Alexander lands west of the Euphrates, co-rulership of the empire, and one of his daughters as a wife. Wow. Chariots, even silent ones, were already outdated as a breakthrough force at the time of the battle. Disciplined units like Alexander's were trained to deal with such a threat quite easily. Following the battle, Macedonians captured the Persian camp with substantial loot inside. Darius' personal chariot and bow were acquired by Alexander. This was a great video by BazBattles. You guys, please let me know if you guys enjoyed this. I would love to watch more BazBattles in the future, but of course, I need to, if I want to, pay for school, I need to watch videos that will get me views. So if BazBattles does not get me views, sadly, I will not be able to watch them on the channel, and we'll just have to watch them on my own time. But anyways, that was enough of that ramble. This was the Battle of Gaugamela, 331 BCE. I certainly enjoyed this. I think this was perfectly paced. Certainly you could, like, I don't think they really needed to talk more about the actual battle. I think they covered everything that was needed about the battle and the movement of the troops. I think that was perfectly covered. So, yeah. I will see you guys in the next video. Peace.